They told me it was impossible. 2 miles down, pitch black water, a graveyard that had kept its secrets for 76 years. But on March 3rd, 2018, my sonar screen lit up with something that made my hands shake: the USS Lexington. Lady Lex, a ghost from World War II, lying exactly where 216 men went down with her. And what we found down there changes everything we thought we knew about that battle. I'm an aviation archaeologist. Most people don't even know that's a real job, but it is. I spend my life hunting for aircraft and ships that vanished during wars, trying to piece together what really happened in those final moments. Some people call it treasure hunting. I call it giving families closure and rewriting history books that got it wrong. The Lexington hunt consumed 15 years of my life, 15 years of dead ends, false contacts, and burning through research grants. But when you're searching for a ship that's over 800 feet long and weighs 43,000 tons, you'd think it would be easy to find, right? Wrong. The ocean is vast and unforgiving, and the Coral Sea specifically had swallowed this carrier whole, hiding it better than any enemy could have. Let me take you back to May 1942. The world was on fire. Japan had been unstoppable since Pearl Harbor 6 months earlier. They'd taken the Philippines, Malaysia, Singapore, and now they were pushing south toward Australia. If Australia fell, the entire Pacific would belong to Japan. The United States Navy was desperate, still reeling from Pearl Harbor, operating with a fleet that was barely holding together. Intelligence intercepts revealed Japan was planning something big in the Coral Sea, northeast of Australia. They were going to invade Port Moresby in New Guinea, which would give them a perfect launching point to hit Australia. Admiral Chester Nimitz made a gutsy call. He sent 2 carrier groups into those waters to intercept the Japanese fleet. One of those carriers was the USS Lexington, built in the 1920s. She was originally designed as a battle cruiser, but converted into an aircraft carrier. By 1942 standards, she was already getting old, but she was still powerful. She carried 78 aircraft, had a crew of nearly 3,000 men, and stretched 888 feet from bow to stern. Her sister ship, the USS Saratoga, was back in port getting repaired from a torpedo hit, so Lexington was paired with the Yorktown instead. The Battle of the Coral Sea started on May 7, 1942. It was the first naval battle in history where the opposing ships never saw each other. Everything was done by aircraft, dive bombers, torpedo planes, fighters. The sky became the battlefield. On the first day, American planes sank the Japanese light carrier Shoho. The pilots were so excited they radioed back, "Scratch 1 flat top," which became famous. But the Japanese weren't done. Not even close. May 8th was when everything went wrong for the Lexington. Japanese scouts had located both American carriers. Around 11 in the morning, radar operators on the Lexington picked up a massive incoming strike: 69 Japanese aircraft, dive bombers, and torpedo planes, coming in coordinated waves. The American fighters scrambled. The anti-aircraft guns opened up. The sky turned into absolute chaos. The Lexington's captain, Frederick Sherman, was a brilliant ship handler. He managed to dodge the first several torpedo attacks, throwing that massive ship into hard turns that seemed impossible for something that size. But you can only dodge for so long. 2 torpedoes slammed into her port side. Then bombs started hitting the flight deck. One bomb went straight through the wooden flight deck and exploded in the crew quarters below. Another bomb hit near the funnel. The ship was hurt, but she wasn't dead. Not yet. Captain Sherman got the fires under control. They even started landing aircraft back on the deck. The crew thought they'd made it. They thought they'd survived. Then came the explosion nobody expected. Gasoline vapors from ruptured fuel lines had been quietly accumulating in the lower decks. Just before 1 in the afternoon, a generator sparked. The explosion ripped through the ship's interior like a bomb going off inside her guts. More explosions followed as aviation fuel ignited. The fires spread faster than damage control teams could respond. By mid-afternoon, the ship was clearly dying. Fires were burning out of control in multiple sections. Explosions kept erupting. Captain Sherman finally gave the order nobody wants to give: abandon ship. The crew started going over the side. Destroyers pulled alongside to take men off. Some sailors jumped into the ocean and swam. The evacuation was relatively organized considering the circumstances, but 216 men didn't make it off. Some were killed in the initial attacks. Others died in the internal explosions. Some were trapped below decks when compartments flooded or fires cut off their escape routes. By evening, the Lexington was a burning hulk, listing heavily. The destroyer, USS Phelps, was ordered to finish her off with torpedoes to prevent the Japanese from capturing or salvaging her 5 torpedoes later. Around 8 that evening, the USS Lexington rolled over and disappeared beneath the Coral Sea. She sank in water that was over 2 miles deep. For 76 years, she stayed down there. The United States Navy had rough coordinates from where she sank, but rough in the middle of the ocean means a search area of hundreds of square miles. And we're not talking about shallow water here. The Lexington went down in roughly 3,000 meters. That's almost 10,000 feet. At that depth, the pressure is crushing. The water is near freezing. There's zero light. It's more hostile than outer space in some ways. I first got seriously involved in the search effort in 2003. By then, I'd already worked on several World War II aircraft recovery projects, finding planes in jungles, in lakes, crashed in mountains. But a ship this deep was different. The technology required was insanely expensive. We needed advanced sonar systems, remotely operated vehicles with cameras that could handle the pressure, and ships equipped to deploy all this gear. More importantly, we needed funding. Do you know how hard it is to convince people to give you millions of dollars to look for a ship that's been gone since 1942? Very hard. We started by going through every piece of documentation we could find: action reports from the battle, deck logs from the destroyers that rescued survivors, Japanese records from their side, navigator charts. We interviewed some of the last surviving crew members from the Lexington. These men were in their 90s by then, but their memories of that day were crystal clear. They described the exact angle of the sun when they abandoned ship. They remembered which direction the ship was drifting. They talked about the current and the wind. Every detail mattered. We created computer models based on where the ship was last seen, the ocean currents in that area, the rate she was sinking, her weight distribution. We calculated probable impact points on the seafloor. Even with all that data, our initial search area was still enormous. In 2005, we got our first real expedition funded. We spent 3 weeks dragging sonar equipment through the Coral Sea. We found interesting geological features. We found several shipwrecks from later periods. We did not find the Lexington. It was heartbreaking. We tried again in 2009. Better equipment this time. More sophisticated imaging. We narrowed the search grid based on what we'd eliminated before. Still nothing. Another dead end. Another few years of questioning whether we were even looking in the right place. Some historians started suggesting the Navy's original coordinates were completely wrong. Maybe the navigators had made errors in the chaos of battle. Maybe the current had carried the wreck miles from where everyone thought. Then in 2015, I was contacted by Paul Allen's research team. Paul Allen, the billionaire Microsoft co-founder, had become obsessed with finding lost World War II ships. He'd already found the USS Indianapolis and the Japanese battleship Musashi. He had the money and the technology to search properly. More importantly, he had the research vessel Petrel, which was basically a floating archaeological laboratory equipped with the most advanced deep-water search systems on the planet. We combined all our research, pooled our data, and in March 2018, the Petrel headed to the Coral Sea. We had refined our search area down significantly based on years of research, but it was still like looking for a specific building in a city-sized area. The sonar would scan the seafloor in strips, building up a picture of what was down there. Hour after hour of nothing but mud and rock. Then, on March 3rd, the sonar operator called everyone over. There was something big, something metal, something with the right dimensions. We deployed the remotely operated vehicle. The ROV descended through 2 miles of black water, its lights cutting through the darkness. At around 3,000 meters, the seafloor came into view. And then we saw her, the USS Lexington, sitting upright on the bottom. Her flight deck was clearly visible, though partially collapsed. The island superstructure was still intact. Anti-aircraft gun positions were recognizable. Most striking was how well preserved she was. At that depth, there's no light, very little oxygen, and the cold water slows decay dramatically. She looked like she'd sunk yesterday, not 76 years ago. As we maneuvered the ROV around the wreck, we could see the torpedo damage on her port side. We could see where bombs had penetrated the flight deck. We found aircraft still on the deck and in the hangar bay, planes that had been too damaged to fly off before she sank. We saw personal items scattered around: boots, coffee cups, tools. These weren't just artifacts. They were the last moments of men's lives, frozen in time. The most powerful moment for me was when we found the ship's bell. Not physically found it to bring up, but located it on camera. There, covered in marine growth, was the bell that had rung for morning watch, for general quarters, for every significant moment in that ship's life. Seeing it sitting there in the darkness, I thought about the 216 men still down there with her. This was their grave. We weren't just finding history, we were finding sacred ground. The discovery of the Lexington answered questions that had lingered for decades. We could finally see exactly how she'd settled on the bottom. We could document the damage and understand the sequence of events that killed her. Most importantly, we could give families closure. There were still relatives of crew members who'd never known exactly where their grandfather or uncle had ended up. Now they knew. Now they could picture it. The Battle of the Coral Sea was technically a tactical draw, but strategically, it was an American victory. Japan canceled the Port Moresby invasion. It was the first time they'd been stopped since Pearl Harbor. 1 month later came Midway, where Japan lost 4 carriers and the war permanently turned against them. The Lexington and her crew bought time for that victory. Their sacrifice mattered. Standing on the deck of the Petrel, watching the ROV footage of that massive ship sitting silent on the ocean floor, I thought about something one of the survivors told me years earlier. He said the worst part wasn't the battle or the fires or even abandoning ship. The worst part was looking back as they sailed away and seeing their home disappearing beneath the waves. She'd been their entire world, and she was going down to a place they could never follow, until now. If this story caught you like it caught me, there's another sunken carrier discovery you need to hear about next.